Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 81 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes. And with me as ever, the man who sits opposite me in a chair in the recording studio, as well as sitting next to me when we used to teach, Mr. Ken Kelly. How are you doing, Ken?
I am exceptionally well. Really glad to be here. Great to be here. Episode 81, Counselling Tutor Podcast. What can you expect today? It is a goodie. We're going to be kicking off with not getting a place on a course. Wah, wah, wah. I put that sound effect in. That's like a letting down sound effect. This is a topic that comes up on our Facebook group. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be then looking at practice matters, because practice does matters with Rory. And Rory, you're going to be looking today at timelines in therapy. So important.
It is, and sometimes using a timeline work in therapy can really help a client see the wood for the trees, be able to see the arc of their lives and be able to make sense of why they feel like they are. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we use timelines and the benefits of them.
Nice. Looking forward to that one. And we're going to be ending episode 81 today looking at overcoming challenges, barriers that may stand in your way when you are considering studying, when you're maybe considering progression to the next level. And that could be work challenges. I know in my own case that was dyslexia when I was thinking of going into study. So we're going to be looking at challenges to study, but kicking us off with a topic that can be so very, very disappointing. And I know I made light of it by putting the sound effects in at the beginning, but if you go along and you maybe do an introduction to counselling and then you're looking to go to that next level to progress, and you find that you go through to interview and you're not able to get onto that next level, onto the course, that can be really, really disappointing.
It can be, and this is something that's really come up in our Facebook group. And if you wonder what our Facebook group is, if you go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, you'll find two Facebook pages. One's our business page, so give us a review if you like what you hear. And the other is a closed group, which is where 17,000 like-minded people, students and tutors and practitioners in counselling and psychotherapy, all hang out. And people post their experiences of training. And this has come up a lot, certainly at this time of the year, because as we record this, we're heading towards the kind of June, where people are applying for places for the next course. And some people don't get places. And it can be really, really difficult. And, you know, I'll share with you what a story that I was given, or observations I was given when I first started this journey in counselling. When I did my introduction, the first day I sat down, my tutor said, you know, this is all about the clients. Client comes first. And that was something that was always told to us in the arc of my training. When I qualified and decided to go on to be a teacher, I was teaching a level 2 course at the time. And my tutor who taught me took me to one side and she said, you know, Rory, we're the guardians of the profession. And, you know, the client comes first. We need to be sure that certainly at practice level, the people who sit in front of clients, you know, are able to do it both emotionally and intellectually. And then when I went to train as a supervisor, I sat in my supervision group the first day. And the first thing the person who was teaching us said was, clients come first. And, you know, we're in service of the clients all the time. And sometimes what can happen is that either the courses are oversubscribed, which means that, you know, when I did my course, there was 42 people, I think, for 17 places.
Wow.
42.
Yeah.
And regularly we'd have double the capacity when I taught for people wanting to train. So inevitably we're going to let people down. And sometimes some people just need to go away and do a bit of reflection and think about the feedback that they've been given, which sometimes is hard to hear. And that, you know, that can be difficult. And I'm aware that maybe people listening to this may have been given that feedback, Ken.
It is hard. And it's about looking at what lies ahead. And a tutor who teaches the course on a regular basis knows what is required, and a lot is required, specifically at level 4 when you're preparing to go into practice and actually in client contact in practice in placement capacity. The pressures and the load that you may carry can be quite difficult to carry. And we hear this from learners all the time, and we see it in the Facebook group all the time with people trying to balance life at work, home, study, the assignments, their own personal counselling, their own personal supervision, managerial supervision. It's so much to carry, and that is one of the things to kind of look at, and that a tutor will look at. Will this person going onto this course be able to make it through to the end? But it is disheartening. But I also think if you take the feedback that is given, as Rory says, and reflect on that, and just if it is your passion, if it is your heart's will to be a counsellor, then don't give up. It's not the end of the road if you don't make it onto a course. It's just disappointing that you can't be in that course at that time. You can try other learning providers. You might try the next academic year, but just don't give up. Hold on to the reasons why you started this journey in the first place.
Absolutely. And, sometimes, and, tutor's only human. It may be there's a personality clash. A good provision. When I used to teach, myself and the other tutor that I used to work with, we would get the applications, and we would then kind of do it together. It wasn't a single view. I was very insistent on that. It wasn't just my view, because I'm human, and sometimes not to put too fine points on it, there's some people that I kind of struggled with a bit, so it was useful to have a counterbalance to say, no, they're okay, they'll be fine. I think what you're seeing is this, but what I'm seeing is that, and that really gave clarity. And the other unfortunate truth, certainly in further education at the moment, is that tutors have to play a numbers game, and that numbers game is making sure everybody passes and everybody stays. And woe betide if tutor has a bad year because they end up out of a job. So I'm thinking that perhaps sometimes tutors, to preserve their own livelihoods, because they've got mortgage to pay, sometimes have to do that. And it's just the nature of education at the moment. It's the same in every educational establishment. If you don't get everybody past the finish line and everybody doesn't pass, then you may very well be joining the unemployment queue.
100%. And this is very real. It's very real, as you say, at the moment, Rory, because we're coming to that time where people will be considering that next level of their studies, that progression, as it were, applying to service providers. And sometimes you can be knocked back within your own learning institution. You can do a level 3 in your own learning institution, go on to level 4 and find that there is not a placement for you. And it doesn't mean that if you start in one learning institution that you're gonna be able to progress to the end within that learning institution. And I guess there's the other side of this is when you do maybe go to do a level 2, maybe a counselling concept, an introduction to counselling. You think to yourself, yes, this is something I'd like to go further with, and you go to a different learning institution to go on to their level 3, and their awarding body differs from the one that you did your level 2 with, or maybe you did your level 2 online, and there can be other elements that come into this as well. And I think it's always about just going back to, why did you start this journey? It's going to be difficult. There's going to be barriers along the way, and it's about just pushing through those barriers, reminding yourself why you're there. And if one door is closed, hey, go to the next one and knock on that, because if you try, if you want it, you will get it. That's a for sure. If you want it, you're willing to do the work on self, you will get there.
Absolutely. And, I've had learners who've come back after a year out, completely different people, completely in the right place. And what I would say to you is use that time. If this is your passion, if this is what you want to do, use it as an opportunity. You might not get on the course this year. What are you going to do in this year to kind of keep your skills fresh and also gain more experience? And a lot of people I knew did volunteering. They worked for a local charity. They used their counselling skills in other ways. And as a consequence of that, when they came back, they were just different people. They were more rounded. They were more confident. And some of them actually took the year out to actually get through family issues, and some changed jobs. And it was amazing. It was amazing just the change in a year that can happen. So don't give up is what I'd say. And always ask for feedback. Always ask for feedback. I think that if you're not accepted, ask the tutor for feedback, and then at least you've got something to work on or observe.
100%. And please join in this topic of conversation in the Facebook group. Rory's told you how to find that. Go to Facebook, put in Counselling Tutor, come on in and chat about this. And if you're facing any frustrations, share them. There's lots of us there to be there for you. Moving on to something really important, practice matters. And we're going to be looking today at timelines in therapy, Rory.
Yes, one of the most wonderful things I was ever taught when I was a student was the skill of helicoptering, Ken.
Oh yeah,
and I didn't have flying lessons. But what my tutor taught me was that sometimes you could both get into this like a wooded area with the material, and you cannot see literally the wood for the trees. And sometimes it's useful just to get an overview on where the client is, and there's no better way of doing that than using a timeline. To show the client where they are, what losses they've had, what experiences they've had, and then you can see it. And it really, when I've used it, it really does people go, wow, I just didn't see that. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to do timelines and maybe different forms of timelines.
Let's dive straight into Practice Matters.
Practice Matters.
It was Søren Kierkegaard, the philosopher who influenced the thinking of Carl Rogers, that stated, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward." This observation tells us a universal truth about the human condition, that sometimes our here and now perceptions are forged by experiences in our past. This may leave us with strong emotions, which we carry through into our lives long after the events that generated these feelings have gone. It is usually when these feelings overcome us, or are so persistent they fill our waking days and dreaming nights, that we may present for therapy. Over the years I've seen many clients who have come to therapy but are unsure why they feel anxious or depressed. It's almost like these feelings have been with them forever. This is where using a timeline can be useful. Get a piece of paper, or even better, flip chart paper, and position it in landscape format. Draw a horizontal line along the horizontal axis. Over the top of the line, draw a plus sign, and beneath the line, add a minus sign. Ask the client to fill in the timeline with any event they can remember and the age they experienced it. It's important to get them to do this in chronological order, from when they were young to where they are now. Get the client to grade the event from 1 to 10, 10 being high and 1 being low. What you may get is an overview of issues such as traumatic events, losses, change of home, times in hospital, and the intensity of these events and the feelings generated from them. Crucially, this map will show the client their age and the time frame these events took place. Sometimes clients can show surprise and shock about how many events there are and what age they were when the events happened. Crucially, it can give an indication of when they started to feel emotional or unwell, and sometimes physically unwell. It's also useful for helping the client become aware of themes that connect and cut across different life events and timeframes, recognising achievements, personal growth, life lessons, and the wisdom generated from them. Seeing how the client has used negative events to put changes in place. Being aware of how the past informed the future. Understand how their past experiences prepared the client to face future challenges. It's always worth noting that it's not the event, but how the client perceive the event and how they feel about the event that will influence their coping style. Before undertaking this exercise, please consider the following. The client needs to be aware that the timeline work may bring up strong emotions, that they can stop at any time, that they may wish to explore one event over others, that they may wish to add their here and now narrative to the timeline, i.e. a client who looks at something that happened as a child and then realises that as a child they had no control. Make sure to leave enough time to ground the client before you come to the end of the session. Sometimes it's useful to ask the client, is there anything specific on the timeline they wish to explore? Sometimes this is where the real work begins. As Kierkegaard observed, looking backwards to move forwards.
Thank you, as always, Rory. It's fascinating. And, it's so important to have that understanding of the timeline, understanding where clients will be at different times and where we as the therapists need to be when we look at those timelines. And, of course, if you want to get Rory's super duper handout, you can do that by just going to our website, that is counsellingtutor.com. Click right at the top where it says podcasts, and you'll be taken through to the podcast page. Look for episode 81, and all the show notes of today's episode are there with all the links that we may mention, and Rory's super duper handout can be downloaded free of charge from within that page. You just put in your email address and it is sent directly to your inbox. If you are a member of the Counselling Study Resource, that's our paid for service at Counselling Tutor, then this handout has already been added to your handouts vault, so no need to go and download that from the show notes page. And if you're wondering what is this paid for service called the Counselling Study Resource, well, we speak more about that at the end of today's episode, so just stay tuned for that one. But moving on now, and we're moving on to I think a very important topic, and one that is very dear to my heart, one again that we see so often brought up in the Facebook group, and this is the challenges that we face with our studies, before study, contemplating study, during study, and it can be tricky. Studying is tricky. It's a heavy burden to carry at times.
It is, Ken. And what I would say is that I've taught on a number of different courses, not counselling related. And I have to tell you, the counselling course is like the special forces education.
Black Ops.
Black Ops. It's literally night and day. I've taught level 5 courses and level 6 courses. And the amount of work that people have to do for those courses and the personal development and all the other stuff that goes around it absolutely is nothing like a counselling course. When I finished mine, I remember someone saying to me, "This isn't this level. It's degree level."
Yeah.
We're absolutely worn out at the end of it. We were drilled into the ground, and I think that's something to, understand. That one of the challenges is that you don't know what you don't know, and when you go into it, it's then when people realise just how demanding it is. So my observation would be is before you start, make sure you kind of plan your life around it, because it will literally take over your life. Definitely.
Yeah, it really is a free time remover, if I might say. And I work with supervisees who are in placement counselling positions, and they will from time to time bring how their life looks, and it reminds me, looking back on mine, where I was holding down a full-time job. I was doing a full-time course on counselling. I was doing placement hours in 2 different placement agencies. I was doing my own private counselling. I was going and seeing my supervisor. My family were pulling from the one side, saying, "You're working all the time. We're never seeing you anymore." It was tough, and I had no time for myself, any me time, any time to kind of let off steam and just let it all go. Holidays went out the window, and it was 3 years of really, really intensive work, and I recognised that. It damaged me. I wouldn't say damaged, but I definitely took some knocks and bruises. I was tired, and I remember coming to the end of my studies and saying, the people were going, "Oh, I'm gonna progress now, and I'm gonna go on and do a degree and masters." And I was going, "I'm gonna do nothing now. I'm just gonna sit back and let this wash over me," because there's so much to juggle. That life, work, training balance can be very demanding.
It can, and I think you are right. It is a bizarre aspect of training to be a counsellor. You come away mildly traumatised by it, and I can remember in the September of the next year, I graduated in the June, and in the September, when Wednesday afternoon came, because I worked at the shop, and Wednesday afternoons was training usually. Sitting at home, kind of going, "Well, what do I do now? What do I do now?" And it was really interesting post that. So, and what I would say is some of the challenges, it's no secret that both myself and Ken are dyslexic. You should see some of the letters that we get in the post back. We're both dyslexic, and we're dyslexic, I suspect, in different ways. And it is a challenge. It definitely is a challenge. I got all my assignments referred when I was on diploma. I eventually ended up writing them in batches, I used to write 3 of the same assignment and just hand them in.
Wow.
Yeah, towards the end. And it was, what was really interesting is when I came to do my teacher qual a year later, or a couple of years later, I passed them all, and it wasn't because I got any cleverer. I just understand how to do it, and I got myself a good spell checker as well. So that's the first tip. You know, you can get some really good free, if you have dyslexia, free spelling apps for your computer, really useful. And also explore what they have as support in your training agency. Some colleges and universities are really good. They've got loads of support, learner services. You know, and that's what I'd say. Just have a look. Don't let, if anybody says the D word, first of all, I would say to you, don't tell everybody you're dyslexic. They'll all want it, because it does make you massively creative, and you think in a different way. So, you know, those people who are dyslexic, you don't want to think they're missing out. And what I would say is just get as much support as you can, you know, and start marshalling those resources now. Don't wait until you turn up the first day. Start investigating it now. Put your plan of action into place now, is what I'd say.
I agree, and I like how you outlined that. It's very much like putting a care plan together, but doing it for yourself, where you're mapping your support and looking at the areas that you may struggle in. Part of counselling training is knowing yourself and really looking deeply within yourself, and you discover different parts of yourself as you go through that process. And as you do, map out support for yourself, as you would with a client. If they brought a vulnerable part of self, you would be looking to work with them on support. It's that self-compassion, and as Rory has said, there is great strength in asking for help. Any challenge that you are facing, that your first point of contact is your tutor, unless the challenge is with your tutor, in which case your first point of contact would then be the head of that department. But go and you should find the support there. Look for the support, ask for the support, because there is great strength in that. In the same way as we expect that our clients will come in looking for support, because they are strong, and that's why we are there. We can reflect that back as well. Another area that can sometimes appear to be a challenge is age. You know, it may be that you last studied decades ago, that academic words are a thing of the past, and when you look back on those times, maybe that was not even happy times, but you now feel that you would love to go into counselling because of the outcome of what it does, of being there with people in their hour of need, and that's something you want to give back in that way. Again, push through that. What would you suggest, Rory?
Well, what I would say is the times that I had to tell myself I wasn't 12 at 43, because of the transference, when I was sat there thinking I can't do this, and accessing those feelings from childhood as a child who was really struggling at school. And I used to have a very strong word with myself and say, you know, you're not 12, you're 43, you're not that child anymore, you're an adult, and, you know, you could go and ask for help, and you're big enough to be able to go out in the world to get it. And I think that's useful as well. And one of the big differences, Ken, is that there's so much more available. When I did the course, you got a book, you got pointed to the library, you got a reading list, and you got the assignment. Nowadays, there's huge amounts of stuff online, and this is one of the reasons we do the podcast, and we give all this free content away, is to help learners. Yes, we have a paid resource that is really helpful for people, but there's so much online. So, you know, have a look on the Counselling Tutor website, have a look on the Facebook page. There's just so much more out there than there was even 5 years ago, I'd say, Ken.
Oh yeah, 100%. And come as you are to counselling training with who you are. One of the benefits that Rory and I have of running Counselling Tutor is that we get many emails. We get to speak to our members and people and find out where they're at. And there are counsellors that are hearing impaired. There are counsellors who are visually impaired. Look at the diversity that is the human race, and there are people studying counselling and bringing themselves into that. Any barrier can be overcome if you really, really want it.
Yeah, and just don't lose track. Put that picture in your mind of you stood there holding that qualification at the end of your studies. As I used to say to my learners, there's a diploma for everybody here. All you have to do is turn up to get it. So there's one for everybody. And just keep that in mind as you go forward. It gets tough. Just think that's what it's going to be like. Put that in your mind. Can be really helpful. But, be under no illusion. Training to be a therapist is tough.
It is. And I guess, and this is not a pitch for Counselling Study Resource. It's really just to say, but this is the reason that we made and built Counselling Study Resource. It is there as a support. It is there for the person who wants to go in and kind of read up before they maybe go and start their studies. It's there for when you facing those difficult times with those new theories that you don't quite understand, that you can go in and have that decoded into easy to understand language. You can go and look at a lecture on a topic and get a more in-depth view on that. And that's what we put Counselling Study Resources together. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that our base philosophy from both Rory and myself is we came into this for the very reason of trying to lower those barriers, try to reduce those challenges. And we started with our own learners, and people just asked for more and more. Rory started his YouTube channel, and when it was getting to about 1.5 million people, we started thinking, hold on, there's a lot of people that really need this support. And that's why we're there. So please go also into our Facebook group and speak about the challenges that you face, because you're just going to find like-minded, compassionate, empathic people in there who want to share your journey with you. And we thank you for sharing our journey today of episode 81 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, where we got started with not getting a place when you kind of looking to go on your progression route. We then looked at really interesting timelines in therapy in Practice Matters with Rory, and of course overcoming those challenges to study.
Yes, as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
If you enjoy the topics and handouts here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast, then you will love the Counselling Study Resource. CSR was built by myself, Ken, and Rory Lees-Oakes to give you the support you need during your counselling studies. So get access to the world's most comprehensive collection of resources aimed at supporting you in your journey to become a counsellor. Take the stress out of your studies by visiting counsellingtutor.com/CSR. That's counsellingtutor.com/CSR.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.